Here we go. To the participants, thanks so much everyone for joining the session. Apologies for the error that we had with the link. While we still have some individuals signing in, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Donald Tive, who will be presenting on student access, retention, and academic performance. Thank you, Donald. You've got your 10 minutes.
Thank you, Eugenie, and good morning, everyone. As introduced, my name is Donald Tive, and I am a learning designer here at the University of Pretoria, UP Online Directorate. And today I will be reporting on part of my master's study as well as related research projects working on student retention in fully online programs. And at the core of my project is seeking to know how do students access academic performance and retention compare in online versus face-to-face learning environment, especially in our context. So we have done a previous project where we have established that actually student retention in this program follows a certain trend, right? It has established that. In fact, I argue that learning programs tend to establish their own patterns, which become almost like their own DNA, and they follow that year in, year out. Over time, you can see the pattern getting established there. So as a background of the program which I have chosen today, there's a postgraduate diploma in public health. I am comparing data from the 20-year face-to-face iteration of that project or program rather versus the 18 months of the fully online. The face-to-face project was a one-year course offered in semester and year module offerings, and students would then register for several modules concurrently. In the online program, it is offered in a carousel offering, one module every 8 weeks. And big question, why access, retention, and academic performance? Well, if we look at main documents, NDP as one of them, there is reference there to a goal, South Africa's goal to increase student enrollment and improve the skills of the workforce. But then let's just look at that alone. We know that universities have got limited capacity to enroll students, and there's just limitations in human resources, infrastructure, and all of that. And on the other hand, we are confronted by the scalability of online environment that looks like something that we can go to. And I want to really look and see, is it really working? Let's reflect a little bit. Again, in terms of access, the online environment really provides the non-traditional student with the opportunity to, gain academic knowledge and update their skills while maintaining their jobs and family lives. This is something that they wouldn't ordinarily have in the face-to-face environment. For example, if I'm staying in a different province, it means I cannot attend certain universities because I have to attend classes, or maybe if I'm driving long distance, commuting between work and it just doesn't work out nicely. So for those students, online education, it's something good for them. But also, it's sort of a redress because there are many students who would have ordinarily qualified to do a certain program, but they do not get into the program because of space limitation in terms of how many students can be taken into that program. But lastly, sustainability of learning programs and institutions really rely on their financial viability. So something that we have to look at as well. Then retention and academic performance. If we look in literature, we find that older studies points to lower academic performance and higher attrition in online environments and distance education. When we look at some recent studies, we find that some report on high academic performance, while others say that academic performance is impaired or lower in online environments compared to face-to-face. And similarly, there seems to be no consensus on student retention. So I think we then need to look at our own situation, reflect a little bit, and see what is happening in our unique situation, or it may well be a situation that applies elsewhere as well. In terms of access, the face-to-face program in the 20-year period between the year 2000 and 2019 admitted less than 100 students, 85 to be exact. And that points out to the institutional factors that limit that already mentioned infrastructure, human resources, and so forth. But also face-to-face programs, they're not so attractive to many adult students who are working and studying, and or maybe are staying too far. So that could be maybe a factor. But then let's look at the online environment. In the 18 months period between January 2020 and June 2021, we admitted well over 1,000 students. That's more than 10 times the number of students admitted in the 20-year life of the face-to-face program. And if I had to make a comparison here, it seems fair to compare the success to, the old days where you sent a letter by post office and it takes forever, and yeah, just simply sending an email these days. It just proves the scalability of online learning. Now, looking at student retention, this is the trend pattern over the last 20 years in the face-to-face program. And what we see is that a quarter of students left in the first year without getting the qualification, without completing the program. And then there the pattern would stabilize, and would see that at least 2/3 of the students would then complete the program. Let's look at the online iteration of this course, and we see a similar picture. 25% or so of the students in the online environment would leave the program right at the beginning of this of their studies. That's now in the first module, and then again the pattern would stabilize, and then there in the about 2/3 to 70s, that's where the picture stabilizes. So there is not much difference when it comes to retention rates in this particular program, online or face-to-face. But then we already saw that in terms of access, we can admit more students in the online environment than face-to-face. Moving along, let's look at academic performance, and now we're looking at the final marks that the students get. We see that the average, the center of this is there in the 50s, 60s, and just below the distinction when it comes to the face-to-face program. But then when we look at the online environment, we see that the picture changes changes so much. It's skewed to the right. Most students will do well. Of course, there are debates about that and all of that, but we'll come to that. But what we are seeing is that it is working well for the students. The students are doing well in the online environment versus the face-to-face of this particular program. And here, what are the takeaways for me in terms of access? Yes, I already mentioned that it is scalable, overcomes those institutional barriers in terms of infrastructure and human resources. It breaks the accessibility barriers into such as entry to the program. Those students would have who qualifies to enter the program, but then because the program can only take so much students, they wouldn't have had that opportunity. Now they have that. Also, it's flexible. They can study from anywhere at any time. The transactional distance is no longer a problem. Time is no longer a problem that much as well. So yeah. When we look at retention, we also saw that the retention patterns are similar. In fact, if we had to zoom in closer, we would find that there's a few percentage difference, and it favors the online program rather than the face-to-face. At the beginning of the program, we saw that each offering drops about a quarter of the students regardless, and then at the end, we left about 2/3 graduating from that program. Whether it's face-to-face or online, it's the same. Academic performance, and then here we can see the picture nicely that in the face-to-face, there it's we have it on the center. That's where the mean is, or most students are. But then when it comes to the online version, we've got more students on the other side. And here what I say is I would recommend further research on why do we have the differences in academic performance in an online environment versus the face-to-face environment. And we know, for example, that in the online environment, there's a carousel format, one module at a time, and then face-to-face, you've got like concurrent registrations where the load could be higher. And also, online environment, we are pacing the students. You should finish this content, these activities within the 8 weeks period. On the other side, a student may procrastinate if it is not well planned, and leave everything up to the last minute. But also in the way these things are assessed, it's slightly different. You have formative and summative assessment. assessments in the face-to-face environment versus continuous assessment online. So there are those differences to consider. But then I would say that this is something that requires a proper study to look at. Just to summarize what I have looked at access, retention, and academic performance in an online environment versus face-to-face, and I found that access was much better online versus in the face-to-face. We already saw less than 100 students in 20 years face-to-face versus more than 1,000 students in just a year and a half online. That is big success. Retention rates, we have 67%, 66, 67% in the face-to-face environment in the 20-year lifespan of that face-to-face program. And then we already saw that we have a pattern in the online environment that tend to trend there at about 60s, mid-60s to 70s. That's where our retention rates fall after 7, 8, or 9 modules. Academic performance, we already saw that students are doing much better in the online environment compared to the face-to-face environment. And this is all that I had to share with you, and there's my reflection on the face-to-face versus the online program. So comparing the clicks and the bricks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Donald. This was a lovely presentation. I think there's so much work for us to do now that we are offering these fully online courses, to start seeing how things differ from the norm, but also understanding the reasons why they differ. Often I think it's easy for people from the outside to be very critical about the quality of material, whereas I'm sometimes convinced that the quality of the learning experience and the retention of the knowledge and the way that students can apply it afterwards is far better and than what they would have had in a normal classroom situation. But we are still open for criticism if statistics like these are misconstrued and not really looked at carefully. I'll open the floor for questions. If you have a comment or a question, please put your hand on and up and or your mic on and ask away. Amos?
I just wanted to understand this. Do you think the level at which students are being taught, whether it's determines the rate of retention or our ability to be able to retain? The higher the students are on the hierarchy, you're likely more to have a good retention, and the lower the students are. Is there a pattern like that in some instances?
I will now use one example that we did. We had a study last year where we compared an undergraduate program offered in an online environment and compared that with this program. And what we found is that yes, there were differences in terms of the retention rate. One had lower retention than the other, and that being the the undergraduate program. But then what I also realized is that each program tends to follow its own pattern. So there is a context to understand. It's not simply to say that because there's an online qualification or there's are undergraduate students, there are things, context to it that we have to look deeper into it before we can make such opinions. That's basically my opinion on that.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we've got to wrap it up now. We are 1 minute over the time. The next guys are starting. If you wish to stay behind, we'll leave the session open so that you can ask your questions and have a discussion with Donald. But the next session is starting, and so I do want to give people the opportunity to move if they want to attend one of the next sessions. Thank you so much, Donald. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, Anki, just to respond to you, yes, I think it has to do with the profile of the student. For example, if we look at the fully online program versus the face-to-face program, there is not much change in terms of the student demographics. We still have like the same age group, the same gender demographics and all of that. Same as what we found in the undergraduate program that is done by the other institution. The profile is the same. So it has to do with the typical students who enroll in that and what's going on, what are the contextual issues that affect those particular group of students.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you.
Marie, yes.
Is
It's
he
from Donald's
done?
session.
Okay.
Yes, he was